Hi, Bill. This is the look over of your car, the Kaiser Darrin. I just have some things to point out to you, some questions, I guess it would be, and make a decision on a couple things. So, one thing you'd asked about was the brakes. So I got it up in the air right now. So these are actually new shoes on here, and they're barely broken in, which is one of the reasons why your front brakes aren't working. They just you can see there's like almost no contact. Now, as a side note of that, I don't care for this material. This looks like a new old stock. I think some people make the mistake to get like new old stock, or they find new old stock material. You know, you can just buy like the pieces and then have, bond them or rivet them, and they just don't work anymore. They worked fine when they were new. It's one of those things that just doesn't age well. I'm not sure about these. This is just my opinion. Okay, you can take it either way. What I prefer to do is there's a place on the south side that relines truck brakes that I bring my brakes to, and they put a nice modern material on here. Then I go out to the kind of like my sister shop out in the suburbs, and we have a brake arcing tool. So I bring the drums out there, measure the drum, and then I cut the shoes so that they're perfectly broken in from day one. And the other thing I would do is, when the brake shoes were done, these front drums weren't cut. I don't know why. They just weren't. I would there's another shop that has a brake lathe that does old brakes. I don't know if we talked about it before, but I can't afford to buy every tool. So that guy has drum brakes, and he's been doing it since, I was a kid, and he's still doing it. So I would bring the drums to him, have the drums cut. I personally would reline the shoes with the modern material, and then I would cut the shoes in a shoe arcing machine so that they'd be perfectly broken in. And then you have a modern material, which is even better than what was before. And actually, like a lot of things at that time, well, even still, one of the focus on cars is to have brakes that last a really, really long time, which means they're hard and they don't stop as well. Now, you can get amazing stepping brakes that don't last as long, but these cars aren't being driven much. So like, I prefer to buy these amazing brake material, and yeah, maybe they only last 40,000 miles instead of 80,000 miles or something, but it might take you the rest of your life to put 40,000 miles on this thing. So like, to me, it's worth it to put the better brake material on there, the better, with the shorter life and the greater stopping. But that's my opinion. You don't have to do anything. The rears are relatively, these seem to be pretty new also. Again, I would prefer a modern material. One thing I noticed here is, like, watch this thickness, and it just gets thinner and thinner to where it's quite thin at the bottom. This wasn't adjusted right, and this front shoe was doing most of the work. This one was just kind of along for the ride. So this shoe itself is pretty significantly worn from not being adjusted correctly. And this one, similar. Somewhere you can see it's hard to tell, but there's where the steel stops. So it gets kind of thin, then you go on the other side and it's quite a bit thicker. This is where so you got tremendous, much more, much less, I would say, much less wear on the rear wheel than on the rear pad, the rear shoe rather than the front shoe. So the other thing I'll show you, so I was talking about the bump stops. This is fully extended right now, but here is a bump stop, which is meant to, if you ever bottom out, it'd be rubber against the frame rather than steel on steel or some other sort of thing. So when I took this down, there's marks from the rubber, so it's more like impressions in the dirt and not actual damage. But these bump stops are hitting the frame, which I think these are probably original springs that are worn out, and the car sits too low, So as soon as you hit a bump, I mean, we're figuring this is in the air, so you figure this is already up here. So it's only this little bit of travel, and you're bouncing out the frame. That's probably what you're talking about. Like you feel every bump in the road is most likely to be that. All right, I'm going to pause this. All right, so here's your car up in the air completely. I don't know if you've ever seen the bottom of this. It's actually really nice under here. I don't want you to think I'm ragging on your car. It's actually quite nice. Your tie rod ends feel nice. I looked at your kingpins; those feel okay. I couldn't perceive any unusual play in any of the suspensions. Somebody's done a pretty good job with all of that. Things that I don't really care for is, so you can see here they have a split lock washer and then a nylock nut, which is a nylon locking. You see these are sticking out. So these are recessed. So the nylock's not even doing anything. I personally would probably use like a very thin washer and use the nylock, or just use the split lock but with no nylock. But I mean, that's kind of like being petty. I am going to lubricate this whole front end. Obviously, being from this era, everything is greased. Anything that moves has a grease fitting. And it's actually quite nice under here. There's no, well, there's a couple drifts, but they all do. I hate that answer, but they all do. You can see there's a couple trans leaks, but you know, they're drips, so they're not the biggest deal. And you know what, I was talking to you about that Ford. This is the same overdrive unit that's on that Ford, and that one had a Borg-Warner trans. This is a different Borg-Warner than the one I went through, but very similar. It's just I think it's just a lighter duty than the Ford one, but this is the same overdrive trans. You had asked, how would I know if or how would you know if the overdrive was working? One dead giveaway is that if you're in third gear, I think it was over 30, it's supposed to engage, and you can tell if it engages because it has a freewheeling option. So freewheeling is it was as if you just put it in neutral. If you're coasting along and just pop it in neutral and you just coast, you know, well, it does it inside the trans. That's what it feels like. There's no deceleration. When it's out of overdrive and you're in third gear and you let out the throttle, the car will decelerate. It'll engine brake. When the overdrive is activated, it will not engine brake. It will just coast, and then you have to rev the engine up until like the engine speed is greater than the speed you need to go forward, and then it'll start moving again. So that's all. And this is the governor. This is what seems to go bad the most on these, especially these early ones. I got a crash course in that one. But, you know, I can go for a spin with you. I know you don't want me to drive it, so I won't. But I can go for a drive with you, and we can go over that stuff. But I want to show you, this is all, I think it's very nicely done. Obviously there's stuff like these weren't original, but it's a nice touch. I don't have any objections to it. You can see that somebody just had done a bunch of work, the new brake lines. This is a Dana 23 rear end, which is the same one I have for my fiberglass car, except for mine's out of Studebaker Champion, so I have 4-bolt lugs instead of 5, but it's the same thing. You know, it's a light duty rear end. It does have a drip. You probably could use a new cover gasket, although I wouldn't be in a panic about it today. It's full, so whatever amount it's leaking is very, very minimal. But some of this wiring, I don't know, I'd kind of like to clean it up a little bit. You tie it together, take some stress off of it, you know. But I don't want to go crazy on it. Those are just my nitpicky things. Oh, I don't have the light on. Oh, I did have the light on. Okay. Your car's so black underneath it that can't even tell that the light's on. Okay, now I'm going to pause it. So I'm going to go over the engine bay a little bit with you. I checked the coolant is full. So when I start it next, I'm going to see, you use the temperature gun, I'm going to make sure the thermostat's opening when it's supposed to open and all that kind of stuff. Things of note is this very likely oh, I'm almost positive this came with a partial flow oil filter, and it does not have an oil filter on it now. And the reason I think it originally had one is because there is the pipe for the flow into the oil filter, which is just looped around